अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामाचार्य शिव ठाकुर हरिदास की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shyam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Navadvip Mayapur Dham ki jai. Ganga Devi ki jai. Mona Mai ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Tulsi Rani ki jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Shri Nama Sankirtana ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Iskan DVT Samstapakacharya Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanande. All glories be Samadhi. All glories be Samadhi. All glories be Samadhi. All glories be Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Jai Shri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritya.
Narayanam Namaskritya.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Devim Sarasatim Vyasam.
Devim Sarasatim Vyasam.
Tato Jayamudiraye.
Tato Jayamudiraye.
Ashtaprayeshu Abhatreshu.
Ashtaprayeshu Abhatreshu.
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya.
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya.
Bhagavatyuttama Shloke.
Bhagavatyuttama Shloke.
Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki.
Bhaktir Bhavati Naishvi.
Krishne Swadhamo Bhagate.
Krishne Swadhamo Bhagate.
Dharmajnanadijissaha.
Dharmajnanadijissaha.
Alau Nashta Drishamesha.
Alau Nashta Drishamesha.
Pranarko Dhunodita.
Pranarko Dhunodita.
Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 2, Chapter 1, and this is text number 11. Very well-known verse. Many of you will know this verse already. But there's a lot of important commentary which is relevant to the Sankirtana movement. So please repeat after me. Etat nirvidyamananam ichchatam akuta bhayam yoginam drita nirnitam harehe nama anukirtanam etan nirvidyamananam ichchatam akuto bhayam yoginam ripanir harenamaanukirtanam. Etan nirvidyamananam ichchatam akuto bhayam yoginam nripanirnitam harenamaanukirtanam. Etan nirvidyamananam ichchatam akuto bhayam yoginam nripanirnitam harenamaanukirtanam. Etan nirvidyamananam ichchatam akuto bhayam yoginam nripanirnitam harenamaanukirtanam. Mataji's anyone? Etan nirvidyamananam ichchatam akuto bhayam yoginam nripanirnitam harenamaanukirtanam. Etat, it is, nirvidyamananam of those who are completely free from all material desires. Ichchatam, of those who are desirous of all sorts of material enjoyment. Akutaha bhayam, free from all doubts and fear. Yoginam, of all who are self-satisfied. Nripa, O king. Nirnitam, decided truth. Harehe, of the Lord. Shri Krishna. Nama, holy name. Anu, after someone. Always. Kirtanam, chanting. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O King, constant chanting of the holy name of the Lord after the ways of great authorities is the doubtless and fearless way of success for all, including those who are free from all material desires, those who are desirous of all material enjoyment, and also those who are self-satisfied by dint of transcendental knowledge. Please repeat. O King, constant chanting of the holy name of the Lord after the ways of great authorities is the doubtless and fearless way of success for all, including those who are free from all material desires, those who are desirous of all material enjoyment, and also those who are self-satisfied by dint of transcendental knowledge. Purport. In the previous verse, the great necessity for attaining attachment to Mukunda has been accredited. That verse is, quote, that very Srimad Bhagavatam I shall recite before you because you are the most sincere devotee of Lord Krishna. One who gives full attention and respect to hearing Srimad Bhagavatam achieves unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord, the giver of liberation. So in that verse, the great necessity for attaining attachment to Mukunda has been accredited. There are different types of persons who desire to attain success in different varieties of pursuits. Generally, the persons are materialists who desire to enjoy the fullest extent of material gratification. Next to them are the transcendentalists who have attained perfect knowledge about the nature of material enjoyment and thus are aloof from such an illusory way of life. More or less, they are satisfied in themselves by self-realization. Above them are the devotees of the Lord, who neither aspire to enjoy the material world nor desire to get out of it. They are after the satisfaction of the Lord, Sri Krishna. In other words, the devotees of the Lord do not want anything on their personal account. If the Lord desires, devotees can accept all sorts of material facilities, and if the Lord does not desire this, the devotees can leave aside all sorts of facilities, even up to the limit of salvation. Nor are they self-satisfied because they want the satisfaction of the Lord only. In this verse, Srila Shukadeva Goswami recommends the transcendental chanting of the holy name of the Lord. By offenseless chanting and hearing of the holy name of the Lord, one becomes acquainted with the transcendental form of the Lord, and then with the attributes of the Lord, and then with the transcendental nature of his pastimes, etc. Here it is mentioned that one should constantly chant the holy name of the Lord after hearing it from authorities. This means that hearing from the authorities is the first essential. Hearing of the holy name gradually promotes one to the stage of hearing about his form, about his attributes, his pastimes, and so on. And thus the necessity of the chanting of his glories develops successively. This process is recommended not only for the successful execution of devotional service, but also even for those who are materially attached. According to Sri Shukdev Goswami, this way of attaining success is an established fact, concluded not only by him, but also by all other previous acharyas. Therefore, there is no need of further evidence. The process is recommended not only for the progressive students in different departments of ideological success, but also for those who are already successful in their achievement as fruitive workers, as philosophers, or as devotees of the Lord. Srila Jiva Goswami instructs that chanting of the holy name of the Lord should be loudly done, and it should be performed offenselessly as well, as recommended in the Padma Purana. One can deliver himself from the effects of all sins by surrendering himself unto the Lord. One can deliver himself from all offenses at the feet of the Lord by taking shelter of his holy name. But one cannot protect himself if one commits an offense at the feet of the holy name of the Lord. Such offenses are mentioned in the Padma Purana as being 10 in number. The first offense is to vilify the great devotees who have preached about the glories of the Lord. The second offense is to see the holy names of the Lord in terms of worldly distinction. The Lord is the proprietor of all universes, and therefore he may be known in different places by different names. But that does not in any way qualify the fullness of the Lord. Any nomenclature which is meant for the Supreme Lord is as holy as the others, because they are all meant for the Lord. Such holy names are as powerful as the Lord, and there is no bar for anyone in any part of the creation to chant and glorify the Lord by the particular name of the Lord as it is locally understood. They are all auspicious, and one should not distinguish such names of the Lord as being material commodities. The third offense is to neglect the orders of the authorized acharyas, or spiritual masters. The fourth offense is to vilify scriptures of Vedic knowledge. The fifth offense is to define the holy name of the Lord in terms of one's mundane calculation. The holy name of the Lord is identical with the Lord himself, and one should understand the holy name of the Lord to be non-different from him. The sixth offense is to interpret the holy name. The Lord is not imaginary, nor is his holy name. There are persons with a poor fund of knowledge who think the Lord to be an imagination of the worshipper, and therefore think his holy name to be imaginary. Such a chanter of the holy name of the Lord cannot achieve the desired success in the matter of chanting the holy name. The seventh offense is to commit sins intentionally on the strength of the holy name. In the scriptures it said that one can be liberated from the effects of all sinful actions simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord. One who takes advantage of this transcendental method and continues to commit sins on the expectation of neutralizing the effects of sins by chanting the holy name of the Lord is the greatest offender at the feet of the holy name. Such an offender cannot purify himself by any recommended method of purification. In other words, one may be a sinful man before chanting the holy name of the Lord, but after taking shelter in the holy name of the Lord and becoming immune, one should strictly restrain oneself from committing sinful acts with a hope that his method of chanting the holy name will give him protection. The eighth offense is to consider the holy name of the Lord and his chanting method to be equal to some material, auspicious activity. There are various kinds of good works for material benefits, but the holy name and his chanting are not mere auspicious holy services. Undoubtedly, the holy name is holy service, but he should never be utilized for such purposes. Since the holy name and the Lord are one and the same identity, one should not try to bring the holy name into the service of mankind. The idea is that the Supreme Lord is the supreme enjoyer. He is no one's servant or order supplier. Similarly, since the holy name of the Lord is identical with the Lord, one should not try to utilize the holy name for one's personal service. The ninth offense is to instruct those who are not interested in chanting the holy name of the Lord about the transcendental nature of the holy name. If such instruction is imparted to an unwilling audience, this act is considered to be an offense at the feet of the holy name. The 10th offense is to become uninterested in chanting the holy name of the Lord, even after hearing of the transcendental nature of the holy name. The effect of chanting the holy name of the Lord is perceived by the chanter as liberation from the conception of false egoism. False egoism is exhibited by thinking oneself to be the enjoyer of the world and thinking everything in the world to be meant for the enjoyment of one's self only. The whole materialistic world is moving under such false egoism of I and mine. But the factual effect of chanting the holy name is to become free from such misconceptions. Om Jnana Timarantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Mukam Karudi Vachalam Pangam Langhayate Girim Yet Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavranda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Madgavir Vigopala Swikuryat Kripaya Yadi Tadevasam Payaha Pitwa Krishya Yustat Priyajanaha. Sridhar Swami notes in this connection that both those who are aspiring for bhakti and those who are masters, for either one of them, there's no other ultimate welfare. The word ichata means those desires of the various fruits that their practices produce. They have material desires. And nirvidyamananam refers to those practitioners that seek liberation. And this alone is ascertained as the fruit of jnanis, yogis. This means that in this regard, no other evidence need be mentioned. His purport is very short. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur largely simply corroborates whatever Sridhar Swami has already written. As the verse itself says, because it's already near Nitam, he need not add much more. But he does say, he does raise the question, out of all the different angas of bhakti, which one is the chief one? How many angas of bhakti are there? Or how many different processes of bhakti are there? 9 processes. So if someone asks this question, this verse is to answer that question. So hearing and chanting and remembering are the 3 chief methods. This was stated back in verse 5 of this chapter, which I'll read. O descendant of King Bharata, one who desires to be free from all miseries must hear about, glorify, and also remember the personality of Godhead, who is the Supersoul, the controller, and the savior of all miseries. Tasmad Bharata Sarvatma Bhagavan Ishvaro Harihi Shrotavya Kirtitavyascha Smartavyascha Ichchatabhyam. So, among those 3, hearing, chanting, and remembering, chanting is the best. It's the chief one. In the chanting, however, there's chanting of the Lord's name, there's chanting of His qualities, and His pastimes. In our tradition, we have these 3 modes of kirtan. There's nama kirtan, there's guna kirtan, and there's lila kirtan. That's what he's talking about. But among those, anukirtan is the best. That means chanting the name according to one's devotion. Anukirtan. Srila Prabhupada says, after the ways of great authorities, but those who are keen and listening carefully, you've already noticed. In the synonyms for this verse, how does he define Anukirtanam? Either following in the ways of those great authorities or chanting constantly. That's the next thing that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says. It can also mean continuous chanting. So it's defined by the previous acharyas, not just by me, Nirnitam. Therefore, there's no need of inquiry or any further proof. So, according to the different methods that one is following, if one is desiring liberation, nirvidyamananam, or if one wants everything in this material world, it's chatam, or if someone is seeking liberation or is satisfied in the self alone, yoginam, for all three, this chanting is that will give them the corresponding result. And that means that if you are chanting with some other desire than pure devotion, you're going to get that thing instead of pure devotion. So you have to be very careful. Chanting while desiring so many things in this world will give you so many things in this world. That's tempting, isn't it? Because we're fallen, we're conditioned souls. But even up to the point of liberation, we can be tempted. And so the devotees are always thinking, conscious. Now, Jiva Goswami has therefore warned us how to chant properly. Vishwanath Chakravarti has emphasized the importance of chanting the holy name, as the verse itself does. And he's saying that one has to do this constantly and after the ways taught by great authorities. The ways taught by great authorities are mentioned in Padma Purana in the form of these 10 offenses that we try to avoid. Who was discussing that conversation in which the offenses are mentioned? Lord Brahma and? I don't remember. Maybe Yudhishthira, I still don't remember offhand, but yeah, so Jiva Goswami has a long commentary here. And I will try to be as quick as I can, but as you've noticed already, Srila Prabhupada is paraphrasing much of it in his own purport. That's why he discusses all the 10 offenses. And it's very good that we chant the 10 offenses every morning, because otherwise, how is it going to be on our minds that we're supposed to be looking out for these things during the day? Krishna says, Santushta Satatam Yogi. If one is always a yogi, then he's very pleasing to Krishna. These are the kinds of qualities that Krishna endear us to Lord Krishna. And so we're not just yogis in the morning at the morning program, but even by nightfall, we should still be yogis. And we should be on guard all day long, all night long, against these 10 offenses. Otherwise, it's very likely that we will continue to commit them. Continue because it's understood we're already committing them. And we have work to do. So, he says, having stated the greatness of Bhagavatam in verses 9 and 10, in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, here, Namakirtanam is taught as the chief among the various angas of bhakti. So that we heard already from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. It's taught as the highest sadhana for all people, even those who are liberated. According to Sridhar Swami, there's nothing better for either sadhakas or siddhas, persons who are aspiring for bhakti and persons who are adept. For persons who have desires, it gives material results. For those desiring liberation, the jnanis and yogis, it gives that, liberation. But it's prescribed for all these people, and it's not necessary to give proof. Kirtan is best, he says, if it's loud. And then he quotes from Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto. Narad Muni says in chapter 6, text 26, giving up shyness, I began to chant the names of the unlimited Lord and to remember his most excellent hidden pastimes. I wandered the earth with self-satisfied mind, without material desires, without pride or selfishness, waiting for that time when the Lord would appear to him. So one should avoid the 10 offenses as stated in Padma Purana. And he quotes Sanat Kumar, who says, Sarvaparadha kridapi muchyate hari samshrayat harerapyaparadhanyah kuryat dviparapangsanah namashrayah kadachit syat taratyeva sanamatah namnopi sarvasurhado hyaparadhat patatyatah. This is, Srila Prabhupada has already said it in his own purport. Actually, all these commentaries are just demonstrating for us that we don't really need to look outside of Prabhupada's commentaries for anything essential. But if there is a problem in interpreting what Srila Prabhupada has said, which there often is, have you noticed? Devotees have disagreements. That's why we have so many groups, even in one city. So one has to know. One has to be able to refer to one's tradition, one's acharyas, and even the practice that they have exemplified themselves. Even the practice itself is also authoritative. That's called Shishtachara, or in the 11th canto, Krishna calls it Aitihyam. Anybody know this word or this verse? What is the verse? Shruti pratyaksham Aitihyam anumana chatushtayam. Generally we hear there are 3 pramanas, but in 11th canto, when Krishna is instructing Uddhava how to figure out what life is all about and what you're doing in this world, you have to use 4. Shruti, the Shabda, the Anumana, and the Pratyaksha sometimes cannot clarify certain things because not everything is explicit in the Shastra. So for that reason, we have to refer to Aitihyam, or the tradition, the traditional practice exemplified by our predecessor acharyas. So they have all decided here that the holy name will deliver everyone, but by offending the holy name, you will fall down. Patatyata is very clear. Yaparadhat patatyata, you will fall down. And we see that. That's why Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, he gives the stats. Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye ityadi. Out of 1,000 people, 1 person is interested in spiritual life. Yesterday, out of the entire city of Atlanta, we had maybe 50 interested people come to the Sunday feast. And out of those persons, how many are here again this morning? Maybe 1, 2 of the guests, I mean. So, all right, so one has to be careful about these things. Actually, it's very interesting because in some respects, we can say that this verse actually begins the teachings of the Srimad Bhagavatam. You can see the entire first canto as preliminary information. But in this chapter, you notice that he begins again with the same Mangalacharana, isn't it? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And now he's actually beginning his teachings. And it's already been pointed out that he's already glorified the Bhagavatam, and he's already stressed that it is necessary to hear. I'll read those verses. O saintly king, I was certainly situated perfectly in transcendence, and yet I was still attracted by the delineation of the pastimes of the Lord, who is described by enlightened verses. That very Srimad Bhagavatam I shall recite before you, because you are the most sincere devotee of the Lord. One who gives full attention and respect to hearing Srimad Bhagavatam achieves unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord, the giver of salvation, as we've read. So, now actually the teachings of the Bhagavatam are really beginning in earnest, so to speak. So it's significant to consider that the Bhagavatam begins with glorification of Sankirtana, and the Bhagavatam also ends with the glorification of Sankirtana. Anybody know that last verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam? Yeah, you're all Sankirtan devotees, so you're enthusiastic. Somebody state it out loud, please. Uh-oh. Okay. Anyway, you get an A for effort. And yeah, so this is something significant. It kind of underscores the very point of this verse, that it's all about the holy name, and at least as the acharyas are commenting on the verse. So, Jiva Goswami also quotes Sridhar Swami, as we've already done, so we don't need to repeat. He again repeats that it should be done loudly, etc., etc. Now, Shivasya Shri Vishnurya Ihagunanamadi Sakalam Dhya Bhinnam Pashyet Sakalo Harinama Hitakaraha. The holy name is not going to help you if you are considering that the name of Vishnu and Shiva are one and the same absolutely, or if you consider that Vishnu and Shiva are actually not serving the same purpose, that they're not together or on the same page. Either one of these mistakes will mar your chanting of the holy name. So we have to consider this. What does it mean when we say not equal to or independent of the holy name, these demigods? Neither are the demigods to be equated with the Supreme Lord, because Ekala Ishwar Krishna Arsha Bhritya. But neither are we to consider that the demigods are negligible, because they are powerful agents who represent the Lord in this world, in worldly affairs. And we have to offer respects. We have to offer respects to everyone, certainly to demigods. Guroravagnya Shruti Shastra, Dhyabhinam. This is another issue. Sometimes people say, well, wait a minute. If it says abhinam, you should not see them as different, right? In other words, advaitam. No. Abhinam means they're not serving different purposes. This is the point. Anyway, we could say much about that, but there's no time. Disrespecting the Guru and criticizing scriptures are offenses. For example, our own founder Acharya has very clearly told us, in his last 3 years, he gave roughly 80% of his instructions on the topic of Varnashram, which he also called the remaining 50% of his mission. And so persons who try to downplay that or ignore that or neglect it are committing this offense. Shruti Shastra Nindanam. Shruti and Shastra we've mentioned many times. Shastra in general means any kind of smriti, literature, but in particular it refers to the Dharma Shastras, because the Dharma Shastras happen to be the most voluminous of all literatures in Sanskrit, believe it or not. Very, very voluminous, because they have to try to take the abstract principles of Krishna consciousness and translate them into ground-level realities that people can act on practically. And that requires a lot of space, bandwidth, as we would say nowadays. So, to blaspheme these Shastras as if they were as independent as we think the demigods are, that would not be right. Sometimes people reject, for example, Manu Smriti, even though on every 10th page of Srila Prabhupada's books he endorses Manu. That is an offense. It's the fourth offense. All right. Namno balad yasya, Tatartavado. Artavada means to think, oh, these things are exaggerations, and yeah, maybe we'll become Krishna conscious one day by chanting, but it's a little bit too much hype. If we think like this, that is an offense. This holy name is very powerful, and we've seen if someone seriously applies himself and tries to avoid these offenses, he becomes blessed, and he becomes empowered even to bless others. It has been seen already, so we should not estimate like that. Hari namnya kalpanam, we shouldn't think that we shouldn't give some stupid interpretation, frankly speaking. One politician in India said, Krishna means dark, correct? Anybody knows a little Sanskrit or even Hindi, Krishna ka matlab hai, it's dark. So, dark means unknown, he said, the politician. And unknown means, the great, vague, supreme, whatever you want to call it. This is nonsense. Krishna means Yashodanandan, bus. It means Sham Sundar, period. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's interpretation of the holy name. And you're supposed to bow down, mister, as we said the other day. You have to bow down to the holy name. So we avoid that. Nam no baladyasya hi papa buddhir navidyate tasya yamair hi shuddhihi. You will not be purified even if you are a very disciplined person. Yama means discipline. What else does yama mean? Yeah, even if you go to hell and are punished, that's not going to purify you either. So either way you want to take it. Prabhupada says this is the worst offense. If you try to sin thinking that you can later on chant and clean your slate, sorry, it's not going to work. There's a joke about this, since we're in a former Christian church. There's one man was very sinful his whole life, just complete rascal, never did anything for anybody else, certainly never did anything for God, didn't even do anything for himself ultimately. Just wasting his human form of life in sinful activities his whole life. But one day by chance he just happened to be walking past a church. This morning at 5 a.m. on the way home from Mangalarti, we saw one man stumbling down the street. Most likely he was intoxicated. So one day this man just happened to stumble past a church, and he thought, let me go in there, and he put some money in the box. That was the single thing he did. Then when he died, of course, they took him to wherever the Christians get judged, and he was trying to get into the gates of heaven. So the gatekeeper said, yes, who are you? What do you want? He said, I made some bad choices. And I had the wrong association, and I didn't really have a chance. And I didn't get. Sometimes people whine and complain and try and blame others for their own situation. So he was doing like this. But one day, remember, I put that $5 in the box at the church. So please, just consider. Maybe you can ask the Lord if He'll be forgiving. So the man said, okay, just wait here, I'll come back. So after some time he came back. He was holding a $5 bill. He said, God said, take your $5 and go to hell. So we don't want to wipe our sins on the doormat of Harinam. As Prabhupada has already stated in his purport, we don't want to use the name for our purposes. We're supposed to use the name to bring us to the level of wanting to serve His purpose. That's love. Otherwise, it's exploitation, isn't it? And everybody's here for love only. Dharma vrata tyaga hutadi sarva shubha kriya samyam api. This is the eighth offense is more likely to be seen, I think, in India. No offense to the Indians present here, but they tend to equate, opening hospitals or eye camps, or, worshiping demigods, or, chanting bogus bhajans about demigods. And they tend to equate this as all the same thing as chanting Harinam. It is not, because those things are all within the realm of karma. And Mundaka Upanishad tells us, Parikshya lokan karmichitan brahmano nirvedyan nirvedam ayan nastya krita kritena. A smart person surveys all possible avenues that life offers, and he considers, wait a minute, there's nothing here that's not karma. Either it's my karma or it's somebody else's karma, but karma plus karma equals, and karma minus karma, you still have karma. So what is the use of all this karma? So the question is answered then. Anybody know the second half? You do know the second half. Huh? No. You have to approach a bona fide spiritual master, and you have to do so with firewood in hand, with a humble spirit. Yes. Evabhigachet. You must do it. So this is what Mundaka Upanishad tells us. So this is you don't really need a spiritual master. You can go to a Ponga Pandit and get advice about how to advance in your karma affairs and how to maybe get some gyan of some sort, but usually it's pretty polluted also. But if you really want to understand what life is for, and if you're really ready to surrender yourself to the Supreme Lord, then you need the holy name and you need a guru to teach you how to chant it properly. Where would we be without this purport? How would we know these 10 offenses without Srila Prabhupada's own sacrifice and his non-neglect of his own spiritual master's instructions? He could have neglected them like all the others did, but he didn't do that. One man's effort has produced a whole room full of people today. So just imagine if you become Krishna conscious. Srila Prabhupada said, I'm only one Indian. He said like this. I'm not, namartya buddhyasu yeta, but Srila Prabhupada said like this, that I'm only one Indian. I've tried to follow Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instruction that Jare dekhe tare kaha Krishna upadesha, etc. So imagine if all the Indians did this, how powerful it would be. And now you have an opportunity. These men like Mahotsaha and Chitta Hari and others who are coming from India and preaching in America, this is your day to shine, because India owns the future. Everyone knows this. Even we heard it in the U.S. Congress the other day. Did anybody see that? Narendra Modi addressed a joint session of the U.S. Congress. And he's just talking about how essentially India owns the future, and it's a fact. They all agree. Therefore, they're trying to get in good with India. But India's real contribution is Srimad Bhagavatam. Krishna Swadhamo Bhagate. Everybody should know this verse here at least, if nowhere else. Sometimes where I go, I always sing this verse before the class, and sometimes the response kind of trails off. It should not be so. This Bhagavatam is the light. And why is it light? Because the Bhagavatam is full of encouragement, instruction, I want to say even, commands to chant the holy name of the Lord, which is being glorified in this verse. So we should not think that this is anything comparable to just ordinary piety, mundane stuff like doing your dharma, performing some tapas, or holding some vrata for some time, or worshiping a demigod, or performing a homam of some sort. These are all auspicious things. We don't discourage them. But the holy name is in a transcendental class altogether, way, way above this. Now, pramada. This is the worst one, actually, in some sense, we can say, because according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says all the other 10 offenses are created by this one. What does pramada mean? Yeah, madness, actually, it means. But in general, we say it means distraction or neglect or just spacing out, as we say in colloquial words. Empty-headed japa. Empty-headed japa will get you to an empty spiritual world. So, ashraddhane vimukepya shrindvati yashchopadesha shivanama aparadha. Here's another one of those disturbing statements. Wait a minute. Aren't we talking about Harinam? Why does it say Shivanam? Who has an answer to this? Yeah, it's used as an adjective. The word Shiva means auspicious. And actually only because it means auspicious, therefore it means Krishna's name. So Jiva Goswami says here, that these demigods, actually every name of every demigod is actually the name of Hari. But Hari is so kind that he allows the demigods to use his names and epithets more likely. Just so that people can worship them also, because he likes to see his devotees glorified, and fulfill their desires also. But actually these names all belong to Krishna. And that's why we find even in Vishnu Sahasranama, that Shiva is one of the names of Vishnu there. Sthanu is another name of Vishnu. Maheshwara is another name of Vishnu. All of them. And all other demigods, same thing. Even Ganapati. It's in the Gopala Sahasranama of the Sammohana Tantra. Even the name of Ganesh is also the name of Krishna. So, Now, Shrutvapi nama mahatmya ya priti rahito naraha aham mamadi padamo namni sopya paradhakrita. Definitely the person who is the supreme offender is that person who is, even after hearing the glories of the names, does not develop real love as we've been discussing. He's still wanting to do some exploitation. He's still wanting to use the name. He's still wanting to do business with the Lord because his head is full of I and mine. That's his supreme concept. That's the prominent thing in his mind. Aham mamadi paramo. So this is the 10th offense. All right, so then Jiva Goswami goes into great detail to discuss them. I don't know how much time I have to speak, but there's a lot more, so you have to tell me. Now it's 8:40. When am I supposed to end? End by 9, okay. So, in Vishnu Yamala, he's mainly quoting many verses. Somebody who sings my names with faith in this world is forgiven by me for 10 million offenses. Raise your hand if you've committed 10 million offenses. Well, we don't really know that, but... You're all too smart. But anyway, even if you've committed 10 million offenses, Krishna says, if you're chanting his names faithfully, then he will forgive you. Once I had this experience, not this experience, but once I was chanting my japa outside in Austin, Texas, in the 1980s. We had a first-class restaurant about 2 blocks from the Texas state capitol and 1 block from the University of Washington. How could you ask for a better location? The clientele was entirely legislators and students. It was so nice. I mean, due to ISKCON politics, it was later destroyed. But anyway, so I was outside of this restaurant one day and I was chanting my japa. And I was trying to sincerely absorb my heart and my mind wholeheartedly in the holy name. I really just lost track completely of the outside world. And everything had become only Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And then I just, for one moment, I just opened my eyes and I saw that there was a gentleman in the parking lot next door with his movie camera just filming me because he was very impressed by what he'd seen. Evidently, I'm assuming that. But, he was extremely respectful. And he just, he kind of apologized for, he just couldn't resist. So this is what we're supposed to do. And if we absorb ourselves even this much, even as struggling sadhakas, which we all are, which I still am, then Krishna says he will forgive 10 million offenses. But not if you commit offenses. This is the problem. Since criticizing devotees is serious, the implication is that physical violence against devotees can't even be described. Nindam kurvanti ye murha vaishnavanam mahatmanam patanti pitribhi sarham maharaurava sangyate. It's understood that if you criticize a great Vaishnava, you will fall into that hell known as Maharaurava, and you will take all of your forefathers with you. How would anybody want that on your karmic portfolio? You can raise your hand. Now, listen to this. Jiva Goswami adds, Hanti, because we're talking about avoiding offenses. Hanti nindanti vaidveshti vaishnavan nabhinandati krudhyate yati no harsham darshane patanani shat. That means there are 6 fall downs. We've already heard that if you offend the holy name, you will fall down. Definitely. Kandipa. And so what are those 6 fall downs? If you harm a Vaishnava, or, God forbid, kill a Vaishnava. It has been done. If you criticize a Vaishnava, if you hate a Vaishnava, if you do not welcome a Vaishnava, if you're angry with a Vaishnava, or if you don't feel joy upon seeing a Vaishnava, these are all 6 offenses. So we have to be very conscious of this. Even hearing criticism of Vaishnavas is a fault. In the 10th canto, Shukadev spoke in this way regarding Shishupal. Nindam bhagavatah shrimvans tatparasya janasya va tato napaitiyah sopi yatyatha sukratachyatah. Very clear. Anyone who fails to immediately leave the place where he hears criticism of the Supreme Lord or his faithful devotee will certainly fall down and will lose his pious credits. An incapable person should leave that place, but if he is capable, he should cut off the tongue of the criticizer. If he cannot do that, he should give up his life. I don't know how seriously we're supposed to apply these things. But, the point is, I think, deliberately these things are being stated to illustrate that this is very serious. You have to take it very seriously. Now, at Daksha's Yajna, Sati Devi, also regarding Lord Shiva and the blasphemy that her father-in-law committed, she said, if one hears an irresponsible person blaspheme the master and controller of religion, one should block his ears and go away, if unable to punish him. But if one is able to kill, then one should by force cut out the blasphemer's tongue and kill the offender. And after that, one should give up one's own life. Sati says this. Durga Devi, whom we all worship and respect in this world, she says this. Doesn't that go to show that the Devatas are not independent of Vishnu? She's thinking like this. Concerning the names of Shiva and Vishnu to be one and the same, he quotes Yad Yad Vibhuti Mat Sattvam Ityadi from Bhagavad Gita, because Lord Shiva is displaying the Lord's potency by the Lord's grace. And this is where he points out, Brahma bhavoham api yasya kalah kalayaha. This is what Balaram speaks at Hastinapur after Samba was abducted by the Kurus. He said, great Devatas like Brahma and Shiva and even the goddess of fortune and I are simply parts of the Lord's spiritual identity. That's Srimad Bhagavatam 10th canto, 68, chapter, verse number 37. And moreover, in the 3rd canto, Kapila Dev tells his mother, one should constantly meditate continually on the Lord's lotus feet from which the Ganga flows and gives extra blessings to Lord Shiva on his head, whose thunderbolt is released upon mountains of sin in the meditator's mind. So, enough said. But still he says more. Lord Brahma says, I create under his order, Lord Shiva destroys under his order. Holding his 3 energies, he protects the universe as Paramatma. Then there's a long quote given here. I'll skip the Sanskrit. This is from Brahmanda Purana. Because he drives away pain, Vishnu is called Rudra. Because he is the controller, he's called Ishana. Because he is the greatest, he's called Mahadeva. He's called Pinaki because he is the support of persons who, liberated from the ocean of samsara, enjoy P, the spiritual sky, Naka. It's an obscure etymology there, but he says it. He's called Shiva because he's the embodiment of happiness. He's called Hara because he destroys everything. And he's called Kritivas because he lives in and operates the body which produces actions, Kritya. He's called Virinchi because he extends beyond. He's called Brahma because he expands. He's called Indra because he has power. Thus, the one Supreme Lord is glorified by various types of names in the Vedas and Puranas. In Vama Purana, it is said, Yastu Narayanadinam namnam anyatra sangshayaha anyanam nam gatir vishnur eka eva prakirtitaha. There's no doubt
that the names of Narayana are used for others. But Vishnu alone is glorified as the shelter of all others. And Skanda Purana says, except for names like Narayana, the Lord gives his other names to others, just as a king, apart from his own city, gives other places to his ministers. Those who know a little bit about Indian history, you know, this is how kings ruled. They would have their capital, and they would send their close people to outlying areas, not only to keep them happy, but also to show kindness to them. So as a king will distribute his own kingdom to his representatives, in the same way, Lord Vishnu shares his own names with those of the demigods. This is the point being made here. And that is the real interpretation of Dhyabhinnam, etc. Brahma Purana says, the Lord gives his particular names to others. To Brahma, he gives the names Chaturmukha, Shatananda, and Padmabhu. To Shiva, he gives the names Ugra, Pasmadhara, Nagna, and Kapali. Kapalishwara. So, thus the meaning is that he who sees by his intelligence that Shiva's qualities and names are different from Vishnu's, arising from some separate Shakti, imaginary Shakti, is an offender, since it's well known that Vishnu is ultimately everything. In other words, they're not competing. Vishnu and the demigods are not like competing for the top spot. It's not like that. There's only one Lord, monotheism, and he is distributing his authority, sharing his authority, I should say, with those who are representing him, commensurately to the level that they're representing him. Means, you know, the more faithful you are, the more like Vishnu you become. In Vaikuntha, they're all like Vishnu. They have equal opulence, they have equal forms, they have equal, in so many ways. But they're not Vishnu. And they never forget that. So this is the point. Okay, so we have to speed up here. Absolute identity would have been expressed by adding the word cha after Vishnu. Shivasya Vishnu cha. So that's counted out. And similarly, Shivasya Shri Vishnu. The reason we put Shri in front of Vishnu is to indicate that he's special. He's the supreme, and Shiva is the servant. Okay. All right, so criticizing scriptures. This refers to the Pakhandas, such as worshippers of Dattatreya and Rishabdev. They become Pashandas by not accepting Vedic conclusions. Or in the south, we have, what is that group, the Shaivas? They wear a linga around their neck. I forget what you call them. Huh? Lingayatas, yeah. They're not strictly speaking Vedic. So, yeah. They're criticizing scriptures. And of course, you know, the Ajivakas are criticizing the scriptures, the Jains, the Buddhists. Anyone, actually, our definition of atheism and theism is different from what the dictionary says. The dictionary says if you don't believe in a supreme power, supreme deity, you're an atheist. But according to our tradition, if you don't accept the authority of the Vedas, that is what makes you an atheist. So it's very serious business. You can believe in God, but if you reject the Vedas, you're still an atheist. This is the point. Okay, so that's that. Arthavad means to think that statements concerning the powers of the name are merely exaggerated praise we've discussed. Kalpanam, Harinam Nikalpanam, means to give some other meaning in order to minimize the name's glories, which is exactly what our politician friend has done. He's dead now, so we can say it was Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, famous Tamil politician. So, offending the Guru is billions of times worse than offending the Lord. Denying scriptural knowledge and not accepting the authority of the Vedas is 10 million times worse than offending the Guru. Shall I restate that? May have gone over your head. There are some important figures here. Do the math. Offending the Guru is billions of times worse than offending the Lord. Denying scriptural knowledge and not accepting the authority of the Vedas is 10 million times worse than offending the Guru. So it's tens of millions of billions of times worse than offending the Lord to neglect the Vedic Shastras, or to downplay them, or to, etc., etc. After hearing the glories of the name, Ajamila said the following in order to show his previous state of depravity. I will certainly fall to a most terrifying hell where those who destroy dharma and are full of lust undergo torture by Yamaraj. But later he says, expressing the greatness of the name, although most sinful, I must have done something auspicious to see those best of devatas, that means the Vaikuntha Dutas, by which I have now become joyful. And otherwise it would not be possible for the tongue of a sinful dying man, the keeper of a prostitute, to chant the name of the Lord. So if you're chanting the name of the Lord, you may think that you're very fallen. You all raised your hands when I asked if you're committing tens of millions of offenses. But this holy name is merciful to come upon our tongues, even though we're sinful. We must have done something, Rupa Goswami says elsewhere. Now, committing sins on the strength of the name will be discussed, although the results of sins are destroyed by the strength of the name. If the person uses the name to fulfill despicable desires, that is most wicked. The power of the names should actually bring about attachment to the lotus feet of the Lord, which are comprised of condensed eternity, knowledge, and bliss, the highest attainment. If one utilizes the name simply for enjoying sins, the offense is 10 million times greater than the sin itself. If you commit sin on the strength of chanting, then that offense is 10 million times greater than the sin you commit. This is what he's saying. So, in other words, again, take it seriously. Thus it is said that there's no purification of that person who is punished by unlimited punishers, yama, or by following many rules, yama, to regain his status by atonement. It will not help. It will not help because we have deliberately offended. That is the big flaw there. So, as will be stated later, the only atonement is continuous chanting of the name. So, Indra wanted to kill Vritra, who was actually a devotee, by the strength of worshiping the Lord through a horse sacrifice, but this desire was supported by sages who desired to terminate Vritra's demon birth and to stop the havoc in the world he was creating. Therefore, Indra did not commit this offense. It's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes we judge people, but you cannot judge people. I'm not saying you should not judge people. I'm saying you cannot judge people. There's a big difference. We don't have the capability to see into other person's hearts, and therefore we don't have the ability to judge. It's not a moral dilemma of any sort. It's not an ethical instruction. It is simply a fact. We cannot judge others. But if we try, what do? Generally, we commit offenses. It becomes an offensive situation. Okay. Padma Purana also says, Madhur madhurametam mangalam mangalanam sakala nigamavalli satpalam chit surupam. This name of Krishna is sweeter than the sweetest, the most auspicious of all things auspicious, the highest fruit of the tree of all the Vedas, and is composed entirely of pure consciousness, this holy name. He who recites the two syllables, ha-ri, has already studied the Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva Vedas. That's from Vishnu Dharma. Parvati says, do not chant the Rig, Yajur, or Sama Veda. The Lord's name, Govinda, should be chanted always. In glorifying the 108 names of Rama, it is said, Vishnur ekaika namaiva sarva vedadhikam matam. Each name of Vishnu is greater than all the Vedas. Padma Purana says this. Giving the name to faithless persons illustrates an offense committed by an instructor of the name rather than simply chanting. Now, this doesn't mean when we go on Harinam Sankirtan, and it doesn't mean that when a person who has very little faith is instructed you should chant Hare Krishna, and I'll teach you how. It means when someone is committing any of these offenses and is attached to doing that and doesn't want to hear submissively to cultivate better sambandha gyan, then that it becomes an offensive situation for you if you continue to push on those persons. So this is what he's saying here. This is then an offense committed by the person who has been giving instructions. The meaning is he has no respect for the name after hearing its glories, but he completely identifies with I and mine. This is the 10th offense also. So that's what he says here. Anyone who chants, remembers, or hears even one name of the Lord truly surpasses pure or impure caste without obstacles. But if the name is given to offenders among the Pashandas, greedy for body, objects, and following, it does not give results very quickly. This we know. In other words, if you chant these holy names with offenses, you can go on chanting for thousands of births, Chaitanya Charitamrita says, and you'll still not get pure love. You may get something. Most likely you'll get what you want. So we have to be very careful not only what we ask for, even what we want. We have to monitor very carefully because the chanting will give us what we really want. It won't give us necessarily even what we're asking for if we want something else. It will give us what we want. So we have to be very careful. So persons who, disrespecting the chanting of the holy name, leave that place where the name is chanting, go to a terrible hell because of that sinful act. Now, the atonement for these offenses is stated. Anybody know what it is offhand? How do you atone for these 10 offenses? We've hinted at it already. Anukirtan meaning? Yes, constant. And then he quotes from Padma Purana. Namaparadhyuktanam harantyeva, namanyeva harantyakam avishranti prayuktani tanyevartha karanicha. Those who have committed offenses to the name, chanting the name incessantly, will be effective in destroying that offense. But if one offends a devotee, it's advised to continually chant the name in order to satisfy that devotee. It's seen in the story of Ambarish that the offense to Ambarish was mitigated only by Durvasa approaching Ambarish as directed by the Lord. And it's stated in the Namakomadi that one can eradicate a great offense by experiencing its results, that's one thing, or by obtaining mercy of the devotee. So 2 ways that you can overcome the results of offenses. You just have to grin and bear it. You have to just, as Lochan Das Thakur said, apane karma bhunje shaman kohoye. Lochan Das. You just have to eat whatever meal you have cooked. That's what it means, really. Prahlad says the same thing, no? What is that verse? Bhunjana evatma kritam vipakam. So that's one way. Or if you get mercy from the person you have offended, then you can also overcome your offenses. There's no other way. So, therefore, he concludes with this verse that etan nirvidyamananam, therefore it's concluded that the chanting of the holy name is the doubtless, fearless way of success no matter what you want. You will get it by constant and submissive chanting of the holy name after the ways of the great authorities who have taught us all these things in these commentaries. Now, we're talking about Sankirtan. In his Living Theology of Krishna Bhakti, the late Tamal Krishna Goswami makes several very nice points. One of them is that the program that Srila Prabhupada gave for ISKCON devotees to follow, daily modes of service and morning program and projects that he initiated within the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, they all embody the main angas of bhakti that we've already discussed, and the chief of all those angas of bhakti in Kali Yuga is chanting the holy name. But Srila Prabhupada redefined the traditional concept of kirtan to a large degree, because traditionally we have the idea kirtan means Some people are dancing and playing musical instruments together, or maybe they're sitting in a circle in Bhajan Mandali. But Srila Prabhupada's conception of kirtan was about as wide as his conception of dharma. And he therefore expanded kirtan to mean any glorification of the Supreme Lord or his devotees or his devotion, and thereby distributing Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, etc., all the books that he labored so hard to produce for us. This is also kirtan. Anukirtan, after the ways of that great authority who is Srila Prabhupada himself. And he's justified this because Jiva Goswami has given the basic idea here, and Prabhupada developed it, as did his own spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. There is a clear link, in other words, between this verse and the book distribution that we're very rightly absorbed in here in KrishnaLife, Atlanta, and that is that the two are non-different. Because what is the result of receiving a book? I asked Vishnu Chitta the other day, where are these people coming from who are attending the Sunday feast? All from books. Raise your hand if you came to ISKCON through receiving a book. Most people. Most people do. So this is an extension of our kirtan. The ecstatic kirtan that we saw this morning with so many happy devotees jumping up and down. And, the floor was also bouncing a little bit. Actually, this floor, I'm getting used to it because, this kind of the pattern in the carpet is a little off kilter, and the floor is also a little bit, huh? Yeah, of course. And it's also a little bit on an incline, and I've noticed it's a little wavy, and the fact that it's soft makes it even worse. So it's like hard to keep your balance here. But ecstatic kirtan performed here, and the love of Godhead that develops and represents. Tasmai Mahaprema Rasa Pradaya Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste. This is what is to be distributed. And Srila Prabhupada's books contain this. This is where we get it from. And by sharing these books with other people, we're just extending that Sankirtan out into the entire city of Atlanta, into the entire state of Georgia, into the entire United States of America, into the entire North and South American continents, and throughout the world. And in this way, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's prophecy will definitely come true. That everyone will be chanting and dancing together, all different kinds of people from all walks of life. It's already been seen. But we have this mandate to expand it further. And this is how we do so. By giving due attention to these instructions about how we chant the holy name, first of all, because you cannot give what you don't have. You cannot give what you don't have. So that's why these verses are all very important, and that's why they're relevant to Sankirtan. I'm going to stop here because the time is up, way past time, but maybe okay, so if he's giving permission for questions, so if anybody's, yes, Brigupati Prabhu, I'm expecting you will give a merciful comment. Yeah. Yeah. Anything you say is medicine. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, I heard this class in LA the other day. Mm. 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 It's a very good question, and I agree that it's not entirely on the topic.
But
There are impersonalists who worship Krishna enthusiastically. I've seen it practically in my life. They would appear to have some genuine attachment and devotion for the Lord. They sacrifice their time. They do worship the Lord. Sincerely they worship. But they still have this impersonal misconception. And, it's not so easy to get rid of that, especially if they don't even have the Sambandha Gyan that Srila Prabhupada has so kindly given us. We would be in the same boat if not for Srila Prabhupada. So, I'm not surprised to hear what you're suggesting. And I wouldn't want to comment any further, though, because not only is it not central to the chanting of the holy name or the Sankirtana that we're discussing, but also because I would just like to see what the acharyas have said about if they have raised that point already, then I can better represent it. Maybe we can discuss it later, if that's
It's a
okay.
good question then. I mean, it's not
It's a
explicit.
very good question. Very good question. Yeah. Anybody else? Mahotsa.
You were speaking.
how we should not judge.
So, what is the difference between judgment and discrimination?
It's a fine line because judgment, it involves a lot of assumption. Assumptions that, my logic teacher in college, he wrote a book called Presuppositions in Indian Philosophy. We have presuppositions, all of us. We just assume things. And that's not good because we're just conditioned souls. We're an illusion. So, judging people is at best done on the basis of some conditional assumption. At worst, it's done out of envy. But discrimination is a different thing because discrimination is ideally not only because we have to discriminate in order to make advancement. Actually, discrimination is the very key word of Madhyama Adhikar, is it not? He has to see there, this person's a devotee, that person's envious, this person is above me, this person is below me, etc., etc. So discrimination is very necessary for making advancement into and within the Madhyama Adhikari status. But it's also based very solidly on the instructions that we have received from Shastras, rather than the assumptions that we've made about life on our own. In other words, it's not speculative. And, we have to select our association very carefully on the basis of what we can see by external symptoms, and we discussed those yesterday for those of you who were at the Sunday feast. There are standards of behavior for a civilized human being and for a Vaishnava as well. And if someone is following those standards, then that person has to be respected. The person may or may not be as advanced as we think. That's a matter of faith. But within reason, we can always err on the side of caution, if you will, by giving respect to those who are following the standards. And the standards are pretty much the only objective yardstick that we have to do the necessary judgment, if you will, or discrimination, as you put it. But Vivek is a very important, Vivek means discrimination. It's a very important necessity for anybody who wants to advance, because you have to select a guru after all, don't you? And you have to choose which of the devotees am I going to associate with. Some persons who pass as devotees, actually Srila Prabhupada said in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there are demons in this movement also. That's a stronger statement than I would be comfortable making. But Srila Prabhupada said it not only once. So what to speak of that? There are devotees who can elevate us, and there are devotees who will degrade us, and we have to choose which one is going to do which one. So discrimination is very necessary, but it is different than judgmentalism, and it's also different than envy or exploitation. This concept of transcendental discrimination is completely absent in the material world. Completely absent, because they have no need. Their whole purpose is exploitation of the Lord, of his energies, and all the other living entities that we encounter. Every situation we enter into, we begin calculating profit and loss. And, what's in it for me? This is our default mentality. Aham mamadi padamo, as we read. So discrimination is a very necessary element of our project for elevating our consciousness out of this animalistic consciousness. But it has to be done on the basis of Shastra, and it has to be motivated by the desire to attain pure love. A caste system. This is like the archetypical paradigm for exploitation and discrimination in the material world. Negative exploitation, negative discrimination. That caste system only arises when love of Godhead has been double-clicked. If we push Krishna out of the picture and still have to try to have a varnashram system, it will instantly become the caste system, and it will instantly exploit, because it can do nothing else. What is that? Krishna bhakti nishkama taiva shanta. Bhukti mukti siddhi kami shakalaya shanta. Krishna bhakti nishkama taiva shanta means only the devotees can actually be desireless. And Prabhupada made that point in his purport, if you were hearing. The devotees are only they're desireless in the sense that they don't want anything for themselves, but they're full of desire because they want whatever Krishna wants. That is their transparency. So, you cannot expect that from persons who want bhoga, from persons who want siddhis, and from persons who want mukti. It cannot happen. They can only exploit us and degrade us. So we have to use our discrimination, but we have to use it wisely, and we have to use it properly, and we have to use it mainly with reference to the Shastra. Shastra yonitvat. The center of everything is always Shastra. Okay? Another comment by Vishnu Chitta Prabhu.
Prabhu, so you described reading how Anukirtanam is the recommendation to destroy offenses, constant chanting. We also heard that Anukirtanam is following kirtan that is performed following. And that book distribution is Anukirtanam. So can we say that by performing book distribution, one will be freed from all offenses committed?
You mean performing book distribution?
Exclusive or, I mean, all the time.
I mean, you still have to chant your rounds.
That's
I mean, you get 2 extra hours for book distribution without rounds, right? No, you have to follow that is Anukirtana. Anukirtana is following, this is the whole point. You have to follow the program as it's been chalked out by His Divine Grace. And then we get the result that His Divine Grace was living, embodying. We can get the same result. There's no bar like that. So yeah, is it answering your question? Maybe I don't understand your question.
Well, my question is, so there's constant chanting of the holy name. We're recommended to chant literally the day. And then
Yes.
there's kirtan where we follow the instructions of the spiritual master, we glorify, of which Srila Prabhupada gives special emphasis to book distribution.
Yeah.
So if one engages and follows in that, in those in the footsteps of predecessor acharyas and performs devotional service, does that Anukirtanam count as does that help one clear one's offenses?
Yeah, well. He gave his recipe for committing a specific offense. The first thing is that you have to just eat that reaction and tolerate it until it wears away, which it eventually will. And the other one is that you have to get the mercy of the person that has been offended. So, if you're saying that book distribution alone is sufficient to eradicate all of the offenses that we may be committing, not maybe, we are committing, I would be hesitant to say that, because otherwise what is the point of that instruction? Those 2 instructions, those 2 options that are being given. To just continue with Krishna consciousness as we're already doing, that's not really being given as an option, as far as I can see. Maybe somebody else can comment. Brigupati Prabhu.
I'd like to answer the question, because I just think I've come across a third option. And I'm in the purport to Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 15, Text 25. At the end of the purport, Prabhupada says, he's saying, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita said that if one does not develop ecstatic symptoms while chanting Hare Krishna, it is to be understood that he's still offensive. Chaitanya Charitamrita suggests a nice remedy in this connection. There it is said in verse 31, chapter 8 of Adi Lila, that if anyone takes shelter of Lord Chaitanya and just chants the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna, he becomes freed of all offenses.
Yeah.
So how do we understand that?
Yeah. Well, this is why we chant Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu. We're begging for the mercy of that person that we've offended, are we not? And we're begging from the most merciful form of that person that we've offended. Rupa Goswami takes great pains in his Loka Bhagavatamrita to point out that Krishna is the most merciful of all the forms of Bhagavan. And we know that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not different from Krishna, but there is a difference in that he's in his most merciful mood. So we're worshiping the most merciful Bhagavan in his most merciful mood. And we're begging for his mercy, so I think it's the same thing, isn't it? We have to get the mercy of that person that we've offended. But if we've offended a Vaishnava or the spiritual master, then Krishna is going to say, no, you don't need to talk to me, you need to talk to him. That point should be noted, I think, with regard to Vaishnava or Guru Aparat. But as far as deity Aparat or Nama Aparat, we can beg for mercy, and once he's merciful, then we're forgiven. But oftentimes he doesn't really forgive our offenses so soon, because it seems as if he wants us to know that this is not an easily, overcome problem. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in regards to Priyavrata Maharaj in the 5th canto, Priyavrata Maharaj did not want to get married. He was really, really opposed. They had to, Swayambhuva Manu had to come, Lord Brahma had to come, all these big Gurujanas had to come and convince him to get married, because his hesitance was that I don't want to fall into Maya. And when people get married, they generally fall in Maya, to some degree at least. So he didn't want that to happen, but they pushed him into it. What do you do when your gurus are pushing you? You have to do it. So he got married. And what happened? He fell in Maya. At least that's what the Bhagavatam says. So, you know, even you're doing the right thing under the right guidance and you have the right motivation, but, you know, if it's just meant to be, it's meant to be. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments therein. There are different reasons that Krishna's devotees also have to undergo suffering. Number one, they've committed an offense. And number two, it may be, it's even worse actually. It may be that Krishna, for some inscrutable purpose, just wants you to suffer. Because that happens. He does do like that sometimes. Look at Jatayu. Right? Jatayu, I mean, it doesn't look as if he won anything, does it? But he played his part in the Leela. That's the part that Ramchandra wanted him to play. He was killed. So, you know, therefore Srimati Radharani prays, Ashlishtiva paradatam finishtam amadarshanat maramhatam karodava. You can do anything to me, she says. The context is that when Krishna had gone away to Mathura, and all the gopis were just not only the gopis, everybody in Vraj was completely distraught, traumatized. Her friends, close confidants, they're coming, look, you know, he's not coming back. You're loving him, but we don't see that he's really reciprocating, and, you know, take care of yourself. We can't see you like this. You know, he's just, and she agrees with them. She says, I know he's Lampart. Lampart is a heavy, heavy word in Sanskrit and Hindi. Heavy word. Debauch, you know, cad, cur, reprobate, you know, rascal. None of these words really does justice. It's a strong word. And Radharani is saying that, yeah, this is Krishna. I know that. Still, mat prananatas se eva naparaha. I can't hold anyone else in my heart. I know he's abusing me, but still. Now, you know, from a mundane perspective, people will think the spiritual world is full of all kinds of dysfunctional people with extremely low self-esteem and just, you know, I mean, you know, every Gopal Kumar saw them all as wandering around in post-traumatic stress disorder. So, but, you know, this is Srimati Radharani, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, quoting her, is holding this up as our highest example. Why? Because Krishna can be hard to you sometimes. We have to eat that. There's no way around it. You can get around your offenses. You can overcome your sinful reactions, but when Krishna wants to stick it to you, there's nothing you can do. And that's why in Vrindavan, we don't really worship Krishna so much. We worship Radharani instead. Because she's soft-hearted, like all women. And she's a devotee like us. And she knows what it's like to be a devotee. And she will give us mercy when Krishna's a little hard. We're banking on her only.
Is experiencing service and separation, which I was always under the impression that's what Radharani is that Krishna sticking it to you? I mean, how does that?
Well, yeah, I'm bringing it down. Of course, you know, all of us have to undergo things that we know that not a blade of grass is moving in this world without the Supreme Lord's sanction. So what's he doing to me? That people get angry at God sometimes. There are many times people, they stop coming to say, I'm angry at Krishna because I lost my son or whatever. So these things happen. That's what I'm talking about. No, in the spiritual, but my point is that the Srimati Radharani's example is there for us to follow, even in our own imperfect way. You know, that's really tough. Usually we try to justify, you know, rejection somehow or other, but she's saying that, you know, even though he's abusing me, I'm not going to give him up. And that's something we have to try to, that's an ideal that we have to try to appreciate and maybe one day emulate even. But Until then, we take shelter of Srimati Radharani and her representatives, because that's where the real mercy is going to be. Is that okay? And the foremost representative of Srimati Radharani is His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. And that's why we are distributing these books every day. Because it is the highest thing. Yogyana mattam bhuvanam dayalur ulaghayana pyakramot pramattam. The very lowest people, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving the very highest thing. That's inconceivable mercy. Christians talk about amazing grace. In the end of his Sri Krishna Lilastava, Sanatana Goswami spends several verses glorifying the mercy of Krishna, because it really is amazing in that way. You're raising your hand, or you just, yeah. So yeah, anyway, I don't want to take up too much more time. I know we're on a schedule, so we should stop now. It's 9:30. Thank you all very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Sankirtana Mahotsava ki jai. Go Premanandi.